What up, everybody? Welcome into the College Chaos Podcast. Garrett Ross here with you alongside my man, Jack Mackenzie. And we got a lot of stuff to get to today, man. When you look at the grand scheme of college athletics, it's never changed. It's ever changing with the landscape. I think when you look at this week, you got Florida State and Clemson flexing their muscles and trying to take a Texas OU approach. USC, UCLA wanting to chunk the deuce to the ACC and ride out into the sunset. You also got some hoops action. We are finally here in March. March Madness is upon us, and if you are a regular watcher and listener of this show, then you will come to the conclusion and realization we did not do an episode last week.
No, we did not. That was, we haven't been the best to start out here, but there was a very good reason for it.
There was a good reason, and I want to get into that reason. So you had an opportunity to make the trek up to Kansas as Baylor went up there and took on Kansas, and then they headed to the Little Apple to play K-State in that rematch. And you had an opportunity to go and absorb the atmosphere and just kind of embrace what that was like. Tell us a little bit about your journey, man.
So it was last Saturday that Baylor played Kansas,
Yep.
and then last Tuesday that Baylor played at Kansas State. I left Waco on Thursday night after work, stayed at my sister's place in Dallas, did the rest of the drive Friday. I have a friend that I did undergrad with here at Baylor. Her dad is a huge K-State guy and graduated from Kansas State. So she's from Manhattan, and I stayed with her parents. Such lovely people, great time. But drove into Lawrence on Saturday, got to experience the craziness that is Allen Fieldhouse. And I mean, dude, it was ridiculous.
So, I've always wanted to go up there. Doing the show, I used to do a show with J-Mo, the voice of the Bears, and he would always talk about going into Allen Fieldhouse and how, certain times the sun would come in and it gets the glare on the court. You have the book of basketball from Naismith in there, and anytime you watch a game, dude, it's like that atmosphere is I mean, Camden probably has one with Duke, but there's something special and unique about Allen Fieldhouse. And could you, is that one of those things where you walk in the door and you could feel it, you step on campus, or what the build up to the game? What is that like? Can you just feel the energy just kind of immersing?
Yeah. So think of how people line up for getting in the gate at football games here in Texas. That's basketball up there. Now the outside Allen Fieldhouse, nothing special.
Right.
Honestly, it's just that's the basketball arena.
Yeah.
But you get in there, man, and it's they haven't wanted to change this place in decades.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why. Now, if they hadn't been as successful as they'd been, it would be man, what are they doing with all these old wooden bleachers? And stuff? But you get in there,
that's some Hoosier stuff, dude.
Oh yeah, and my dad's from the state of Indiana. I grew up watching Hoosiers. I feel like I have some kind of connection, understanding to how pure in the Midwest basketball can be, and this is some brilliant, beautiful holdover.
Right.
And honestly, it really hit me during the game, because if you watch that game, Baylor destroyed Kansas in the first half and then somehow found a way to get destroyed worse in the second half. I think the second half Kansas was plus 29, but just to see the crowd turn, they were never out of it.
Yeah.
They are such a good crowd. They are so smart. Compared to other crowds, I've said this to you and to the other people when I got back from the trip here in the studio. They act. They believe they have a part to play in the game, and they choose when they choose when they want to try to have an effect.
Yeah. Compared
to other crowds, like my own Baylor crowd in the Farrell Center, I feel like the Bear Pit just reacts. It's always reaction. Well, Kansas, it was so the only time Baylor got a score, and then a subsequent stop in the second half, instantly all the crowd of Kansas, not just the student section, all the crowd of Kansas was okay, this is when we get loud as a mofo and just make it impossible for them to score. And obviously, you can't literally stop them from scoring from the stands.
Yeah.
But I've never seen a crowd be that active and like, we are going to have an effect on the game now because we want to, not because we think it's absolutely necessary. I mean, at that point, Kansas was still up like 12 or something, but like it was insane. And just, you look up and you see everyone kind of rising, the crowd crescendoing, and like, there aren't a lot of things that denote sections in that arena.
Yeah.
So it's just a massive bowl of people rising up, getting loud, and you're like, what's gonna stop them from like just pouring down on top of me like a tidal wave?
That's one thing I want to get into. So like from the TV vantage point looking at it, the crowd is pretty close to the floor, and I don't think it's necessarily as close as, and I could be wrong on this, that's why I want your perspective, is when you look at the new Moody Center in Austin, like the fans are literally right there, and I know that's what Baylor's going for with the pavilion.
I have not been to the Moody Center yet. Okay.
So, but even, for instance, I brought up Duke earlier. Like, anytime you watch a game at Camden Indoor, like, it is insane to see the fans literally pretty much on the court. How is that set up at Allen Fieldhouse, and is that part of it? Like, and as far as, like, going back to the chants and how they approach that, I know that's something ingrained in them. Like, you mentioned football in Texas. Like, from early on, you are, like, bred, like, football is diehard, and you understand like all the intricacies of every aspect of football. How does Baylor, or how do other crowds in general, if you're not grown up in that, how do you implement some of those aspects from what KU's crowd does?
Oh boy. I mean, number one, comparing the arenas, that's what we started off with. All the arenas I've been in, the crowd is definitely a few feet closer in Allen Fieldhouse. They're closer, and everything goes up steeper.
Yeah.
So, like, Schollmeyer, TCU's arena, it's honestly like an ever so slightly smaller Farrell Center, probably a little nicer, honestly. Yeah. And again, I've seen a lot of circular arenas where you're trying to fit a rectangular court inside a circular arena. They do it pretty well, but there's always a point where it's like it's a very low slope, and it just doesn't feel like people are on top of you. Field houses just are generally better about that. They're rectangular. They can have that steeper angle. I will say Kansas State, their crowd was amazing, but that was probably the arena that has the most space between the fans and the floor. Mm-hmm. So like their fans, they did a great job. They got loud. They were a great crowd, but you definitely didn't feel like people were on top of you.
See, I think that's interesting that you bring up the rectangular aspect compared to like the Farrell Center, for instance.
We're about to get all like architects up on
no, because I was thinking this because last year I haven't been around to a lot of basketball arenas. Like football, I've done a lot of football stadiums and things like that. But so when last year during tournament time, when Baylor was playing at Dickies Arena up in Fort Worth, that was unique. Like I thought that whole setup, and it's built in I guess kind of it's like rectangular, but that was like the perfect setup for basketball to me. And when you're describing Allen, that's kind of what I'm getting there. So for people, like, because I know there was a lot of talk from Baylor fans, because there's been some mixed emotions for whatever reason about the Foster Pavilion. Like, I don't get that. It's brand new. It's going to be immaculate. And I know it's smaller. It needs to be smaller. Like, you've got to create, these events need to be like must-sees. Like, you need to approach this like I don't know, like a celebrity situation where you're going in and it's an event, right? Like it needs to be something you want to go to, and like exclusivity, I guess is what I'm getting at. You need to be, not everybody needs to be getting in, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, there's that exclusivity angle on it. There's that probably people take that as like, they can make more money off it angle. But at the end of the day, honestly, I just think that crowds really do have an effect on games. You see home court advantages that are real.
Yeah.
Cameron Indoor, for instance, or Allen Fieldhouse. Those are two of the greatest and most well-known. And I think that the architecture of your arena can actually help you win games. And I think that's what Baylor did designing the new arena. It's definitely smaller, but people are so much more on top of things. And it being smaller means it should be packed out almost every time. And when it's packed out almost every time, you start changing the culture. It honestly should help change the culture, because then every time it feels louder. It's like,
Right.
this is a place we go to get loud. This is a place we can have an effect on the game, instead of having a bunch of games where, and as a student who went to as many games as he could for 4 years at Baylor, it was like, I would turn around and look up into the back of the student section, just be like, how are we expected to like have an effect on the game when like we can't even fill up half our student section? I know like those times would be for like a 300 plus Ken Pom team, but like still.
But see, I think it's going to be good. And this is what threw me off. So we were at the Super Bowl, and we had Trey Wingo come over, and we were interviewing Trey Wingo, and he went to Baylor, and he was really like not happy about the Foster Pavilion. He was like, well, it's not on campus. Dude, it's literally like, bro, it's right across the street.
Yeah, I don't know how campus exactly was laid out when Wingo was here in Waco, but the site that they're building the Foster Pavilion on is
right across the street from the freaking football
It would be
stadium.
a shorter walk for me from my dorm freshman year than it was to the Farrell Center. A shorter walk. I don't care that it's on the other side of the highway. They will have police out.
They're going to have ways to walk
they're
over
going
there.
like, it's going to be safe. Like, I don't understand the people and the it's not on campus argument. You want to argue about parking, yeah, it's going to be tough. Like that's just
But
the thing.
couldn't you seriously, like, I think parking is one of those things where, and this would be interesting to ask Mac Rhodes, because if parking, I don't think parking necessarily should be an issue, because you could open up McLean Stadium and let the people park in McLean Stadium, and then you should have a walkway or a tram or something that could take you literally bust the U and you're right there. So I kind of feel like that's one of those things where it's the negative people cling to try to prove their argument, you know, like you're always, you find the little things and go after. And that, I also think it's going to be good for Baylor for like a weeknight game, because a lot of Baylor fans don't live in Waco, dude. Like 95%, and I feel like 95% of Baylor fans live outside of Waco. Like, and I think that's going to help for those midweek games where you're mentioning, like, it's not KU coming to town. It's, I don't know, TCU or Tech, like, rolling in on a Wednesday night. Like, you should be able to, if you have the smaller arena, you should be able to pack that out night in and night out regardless.
I'm sure that the athletic department has the hard figures on this, and that's how they came to this decision. But I highly doubt that the average attendance at the Farrell Center through any given year, even with all the success Baylor has had lately, has been much higher than 7,500. And I guarantee you that the average attendance at non-conference games is much lower.
Oh, without a doubt.
So it's about packing. It's about trying to have as full of a house as possible for every game. Yeah. Not just the 3 games that draw the biggest crowds. Like, okay, I'm sorry to the quarter of the people, like 25%. 25% of people who could go to the Farrell Center for those games will not be able to fit inside of the Foster Pavilion.
That's part of the exclusivity, though.
But yeah. Anyway, I feel like we kind of we can get back to
that's what I'm saying.
College basketball at large.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were gonna kind of take us. But I think it's great to see this kind of trend in college basketball, because the Moody Center, while it's a multi-use event center for Austin at large,
right,
they did a great job, from what I've seen, designing it to feel like a smaller field house when Texas basketball is playing it.
Right.
I feel like other universities are making decisions where they're saying, we want to promote environments. We want to make basketball something that we have a distinct culture for. We might be a football school, but our basketball has its own culture, and I think that these are good decisions. People might hate that it makes ticket prices more expensive and tickets fewer and further between, but it might be a slight inconvenience to you, but I think it helps the overall experience. I think it's better for the sport.
I also think, like, that statement to me is kind of reflective of where the Big 12 is at right now and where Brett Yormark is wanting to take it, with the envision of making basketball a bigger deal than what it is. And the Big 12, I mean, it's
Big 12 basketball what SEC football is.
It is. It should be.
I mean, honestly, it probably is more so than SEC football currently.
From pound for pound, night in, night out, yes, the Big 12 is more than the SEC. Because the SEC, look, SEC's legit. It's the best conference in college football, hands down.
Easily.
But
no one here at this table is denying that.
But there's not – they do gas it up as look, dude, Mississippi State is not on the level of Bama. I'm sorry. It's not how this works.
It's like, it just means more. Meanwhile, this year in college basketball, Oklahoma, who is, I believe, last in the conference standings right now,
Beat the hell out of Alabama.
Yeah. The number, was it 2 or 1 at that time?
I think they were 2 at that time.
Yeah. Either way, one of the top teams in college basketball, and Oklahoma beat their brakes off in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. Point is, this conference is ridiculous in basketball, and I think we're also starting to see it in college football realignment conversations of basketball is starting to get a little more traction. Like, people are realizing that the value add or dilutiveness, whatever terms are commonly used by the big players, the football teams that are left on the table to be scooped up by the power conferences.
Right.
And when I say the power conference, I'm really just talking about the Big Ten SEC right now.
The two.
The two behemoths. The ad that they would get in football from any of the programs left on the table doesn't seem to be moving the needle as much. So you have to start looking at the basketball. And frankly, for the Big 12, it might be really smart to start being like, you know what? We are the basketball conference. And
that's what the Big East
have
did
football
forever.
survive. Like, basically be a Big East that survives.
Yeah.
But
No, I was just saying that's what the Big East did forever. It worked for them. And I think now with so much more money in it, I mean, the conference, the tournament itself is just a cash cow. And I feel like there's so much money left out there. And Brett Yormark is a genius. I think his insight into the game of basketball working in the NBA is definitely going to help with that. But as far as right now, we are 1 week out from Big 12 tournament play. As we head into Kansas City, what are some of the things you're looking for? And does Baylor at this point, I know Keontae George is hurt. I really don't expect him to play Saturday against Iowa State. To me, that's a game that regardless isn't going to impact Baylor seeding wise. And I think without Keontae, Del Bonner, the way Del Bonner's playing, dude.
Oh, man,
go on. Hold on. Let's do this.
Del Bonner.
Go on about Del Bonner. Let me hear about Del Bonner.
Oh, boy. For some context for y'all. One of our coworkers here, Grayson Grundhafer, he does all the other videos on this channel. From the start of the year, I was pretty high on Dale Bonner. He was pretty not high on Dale Bonner. And to be fair, most of this year, he's been proven right. But God damn it, it's my time to shine because it's Dale Bonner's time to shine. Because the last 2 games when Keontae George got injured, Dale Bonner has stepped in. He's gone for double-digit points in back-to-back games. He's been the backup point guard. He has helped defensively solidify this team in a way that will be very interesting to see going forward because his minutes will absolutely be reduced because he is nowhere near the talent Keontae George is. But Keontae George is nowhere near the defender Dale Bonner is.
Not even close.
Not even close. So it will be very interesting to see how Scott Drew manages the minutes and the rotations for the team when Keontae comes back. It honestly makes the question of does Keontae play at Iowa State or against Iowa State here in Waco very, very interesting because you almost want to have more time, more reps where you're playing all 5 guards again because it did not feel like they did that all that much at the start of the year, and they did not do it at this level of success. Now they have higher competition level here, and Dale Bonner's playing well. Seems like he has the confidence. It'll be interesting to see if Langston Love, how long I don't know if he will even be out at all, have any restrictions for the Iowa State game, but when it comes to scratching your eye and then having to go play in an arena with bright lights, I do not know what that situation is. So we could still be down to 4 guards. Baylor could be down to 3 guards for the Iowa State game, which could get a little interesting. But it'll be very interesting to see going forward what Dale Bonner brings to this team. Because I don't know if you remember last year, but Dale Bonner was actually pretty damn solid in the NCAA tournament. And that's why I was so high on him coming into this year. That's why I felt like he was going to take that jump. Offensively, he did not, and that's why he lost out on the minutes.
Right.
But for a team that's been struggling for defense, to have a guy step in and be like, defense is my calling card, and I'm bringing some offense along with it, it's an interesting development for this team, and it'll be very interesting to see where it goes.
So right now, regardless of key, does Baylor have what it takes? And this is so weird. Like every time the Big 12 tournament rolls around and this gets thrown out there, it's just mind-boggling to me. But does Baylor have what it takes right now to finally clinch that elusive Big 12 tournament championship?
I have questions, and this is not questioning Scott Drew as a coach at all. This is how much does he value the Big 12 tournament?
Oh, he's had that. He's talked about that numerous times about how that's evaded him. Like, I think like he's got a natty. He's done everything you can do except that. I feel like he takes that very seriously. Like, that's something he wants to check off.
And now that Tech losing at Kansas has solidified Baylor will not get a share of the Big 12 regular season title this year. Baylor went back-to-back. They could not stretch it to a three-peat. That makes me feel like he might go that much harder into Kansas City. Also, a 1 seed could be on the line for Baylor. If they win the conference tournament, if they beat Iowa State on Saturday and then win the conference tournament, I don't know how you keep that resume off the 1 line. So there's actually a lot at stake for Baylor heading up there. But there's a lot at stake for a lot of teams heading into the conference tournament. The Big 12 definitely has 3, possibly 4 if Oklahoma State drops their last game. Possibly 4 teams on the bubble. Now, the resumes of those teams will all look pretty good because almost every single one of their conference wins.
That's crazy because like any of those 4 teams, if you throw them in any other division, would easily get in the tournament. It's like they're cannibalizing their own people, and this is the outcome to it.
I mean, I feel like Tech and Oklahoma might still be bubble teams in another strong conference.
Yeah.
But West Virginia is playing well right now. All 3 of these teams, Oklahoma, Tech, and West Virginia, the 3 truest bubble teams, with Oklahoma State being on the bubble of being on the bubble.
Yeah.
Those 3 teams have all had moments this year where I'm like, they're done. They're dead. Stick a fork in them. Put them in the ground 6 feet under. Like, there's no way. And then they come back around and they upset some teams. Tech upsets Texas. I'm trying to think. West Virginia, I don't know who they've beat recently, but when they came here to Waco, they looked like they did not know how to win a basketball game.
Yeah, they're so inconsistent. Stevenson is
But then they go and nearly knock off Kansas and Lawrence. Like, they're dangerous. Yeah. And they're looking the best out of those 3 bubble teams. Just by virtue of having the best conference record out of those 3 bubble teams. I don't know what's been up with Oklahoma this year. They pop off and beat Bama, but they are sitting last in the conference right now. Oklahoma probably needs the best stretch run through the conference tournament, but they'll probably play Oklahoma State in that first game, and then you match up West Virginia and Texas Tech. Truly, I think the Big 12 will get 8 teams in. I think those bubble teams they're going to have to beat each other to get in, and they can't all get the wins they need.
We'll see, man. That's going to be interesting, but I think regardless, there's no debate. The Big 12 is the best basketball conference in the nation. It's only going to grow. It's only going to get more interesting. I can't wait till Houston gets in the mix. That's going to be a lot of fun next year. Yeah. But, it's just one of those things where it's the anticipation. Like, it's going to be a lot of fun. But coming up next, we're going to get into some ACC talk. Florida State and Clemson are wanting to separate themselves. They're trying to pull a Texas OU. We're going to get into that next here on the College Chaos Podcast. Welcome back into the College Chaos podcast. Garrett Ross, Jack Mackenzie here with you. And man, talk about a Friday news dump. So, and this was inevitable, but Florida State and Clemson are now taking the role of USC, UCLA, Texas, Oklahoma, and they are coming out and proclaiming their significance over the remaining people in the ACC. So on Friday, Florida State Athletic Director Michael Alford and his board of trustees, they put out, it is funny because they went on YouTube and they went live. So they knew what they were doing. This was very well executed. And he had all of these graphics and everything from the revenue distribution of why Florida State is more important than the other schools in the conference. And look, dude, he's right. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say he's not bringing up valid points. But anytime you start doing this, we've seen historically, it's not good. Like, this is the first step to exiting a conference early. And I'm just like, I'm tired of it. Like, when you look right now, Florida State and Clemson are in a weird position because the TV rights go through 2036, okay? And you're not getting out of that. The Pac-12 still got to make their deal. You're going to have everybody come up through another set of negotiations before you ever even get to yours. And the buyout right now is looking at $120 million per team. And I just feel like if you're ESPN, you have all the leverage in the world right now. Like, while Clemson and Florida State want to go to the SEC or Big Ten, I think more so the SEC, it's not like, if you're ESPN, why are you going to let them do that? Because you're paying them pennies on the dollar right now to play on your channels when you would essentially have to be paying them more to keep them in the same spot. Like, that's not going to happen for ESPN. Why would you do that?
Yeah, no, it's not. But the thing is, Florida State and Clemson and schools like them, schools like Oregon and Washington with the Pac-12, all of them, they know they carry a lot for the conference. And they need to get what's theirs because, let's be real, it is untenable for programs that expect to be in national title conversations to be getting $30 million or more less than their main competitors each year. Like, it's crazy to think. It also will force them out of that conversation, not just because they're falling away from the top, but because teams behind them, like Purdue or Rutgers, will all of a sudden have better budgets.
Well, see, that's the biggest thing to me when you look at this, in particular Florida State. I think they're probably looking at UCF like, yo, little kid up the block is getting paid more than us, and, you know, we've been carrying this state along. Like, we've been the staple of the state of Florida for so long, and then UCF has just kind of worked their way into it, and magically they freaking leapfrogged us financially. Like, that's, to me, is one of the bigger aspects of this, of why they're kind of stepping out and saying, that's not going to fly here.
I mean, UCF is a great example. It's a great kicker, but I think it's really been almost like the straw that broke the camel's back is UCF.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Now, all the other weight on the camel's back, that's Florida. That's South Carolina, especially now that South Carolina popped off and beat Clemson. Like, Florida can only be so bad for so long.
Yeah, but I mean, right now, dude, like, Napier's, he's got a long way to go to get them even close to being relevant, while Florida State is starting to find themselves.
Yes. Florida State is ahead of Florida by miles, but Florida's in the SEC.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And you look at, like, take Tennessee as an example, basically. You can only be so bad for so long before someone finds a way to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I just think that programs like Florida State and Clemson, they almost have to live in that fear. They have to be like, this is not tenable because eventually our competitors with more money will figure it out. We are not smarter than everyone. We are not better than everyone. We need to have everything equal. That way our coaches and our recruiting and what actually makes us unique can take us that step ahead.
Yeah, but I also think it's kind of funny from a Florida State's perspective, as your pettiness in the past has kind of put you in this situation because you had an opportunity. You've had opportunities to go to the SEC, and you didn't want to because Florida was over there. Get over it, dude. Like, go and play each other. Like, now you're in a situation where you were too good at one point, and you're trying to beg and claw and crawl your way in. That's kind of a bad look, but that's the ego. That's the egotistical mindset of that situation.
I don't think they're trying to crawl their way in. I think if they, like, in line with their egotistical mindset, I think they might still believe there's some way that the ACC can survive so long as Florida State gets the money that keeps them on the same tier as the SEC. There's an amount of realism I just don't think they have, but also I don't think they need to have. I don't think they need to think the ACC is about to fall apart. I think all they need to think is, what are the different ways we can possibly envision getting the money we need?
Right.
And from there, they can chase each one down and be like, oh, well, that wasn't realistic. Okay, on to the next one. And eventually they'll end up in the SEC.
Well, I mean, look, the ACC is not going to fall apart for, quite some time. Like, I think it's inevitable. It probably will, but we're looking.
That's a quick statement right there.
What?
I think it's I don't think they're going to make it anywhere close to the end of their grant of rights.
You think it'll dissolve before? Well, I think right now, you're probably right, because when this starts, the rumblings are starting, then it's inevitable. You're probably going to find a way out.
They're not making it out of the ACC is probably not making it out of the 2020s without some change in membership. I
figure, yeah, because what we're looking at probably 5 years before everybody comes and re-ups on their TV deals again. I'm pretty sure they'll finagle a way to kind of get in the mix and work that there. But the funny thing to me was looking at this. So Florida State is responsible for 15% of the distribution, but they only get 7%. That number doesn't add up to me, which kind of leads to Clemson and their AD popping off about unequal revenue sharing.
Yeah.
Anytime this happens, that's a recipe for disaster. And while both of those schools rightfully should probably, I guess, they might deserve it, it's just not how this works. And I think that anytime you're looking at that, you're setting yourself up for failure. But I feel like you could there's no way you could feasibly do unequal revenue sharing across the board. But I feel like if you're Florida State or you're Clemson and you make the college football playoff, or you're in the national championship, or you win it, then you should get more of that money because that was what you did. But as far as like just across the board without that, like, there's no way.
I think the playoff point you made, I think that's fair. But I think the question of, like, the idea of unequal revenue sharing really begs the question of, okay, so if let's say Wake was randomly having a good year, like they've kind of had the last couple of years, all of a sudden Florida State Wake is a huge game nationally. How many non-Florida State eyeballs are being drawn to that game because of Florida State on its own, or because it's this team that's randomly looking good this year is playing what we know is a good team? It should be a good matchup. It's a good it's a ranked matchup that we haven't seen before. Like, it's almost impossible. I'm not saying this question has an answer.
Right.
It's almost impossible in my mind to quantify the viewership draw of purely Florida State given the variables each year of their opponents. Like, you can say this is what they average each year and this is what they average when they play Wake Forest, but depending on how good their opponent is in any random year, it's the neutrals. And the neutrals are what really move the needle here. The neutrals are like, why do I tune into as many SEC games as I do? Because it's half the time it's ranked team against ranked team, and I want to know what's going to affect the rankings.
Right.
So my argument is basically just, you can tell them, oh, we have this big of a fan base and we always average this many eyeballs. But how many of those eyeballs are neutrals tuning in because they want to see random team have a shot at random ranked team versus they're tuning in because it's Florida State?
I think it's tricky because more people are going to be tuning, but Florida State's going to draw regardless. Like,
exactly.
And I think you're going to have more people tuning into a ranked Florida State versus a ranked Wake Forest than you would a ranked North Carolina versus a ranked Wake Forest. I feel like that's the biggest difference and that's where you could draw that, because you are going to have random odds for ranked on ranked opponents, but at the same time, Florida State's draw is just so much more significant, even when they are down, like than any other team other than Clemson in the ACC. So I think that's where that is kind of the separating factor.
Yeah, I'd put Miami up there too, up until the dumpster fire the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is really just I still find it tough to quantify the true draw of the brand. And I think that's the key here, is that Florida State wants to be like, we know, like they know the exact number, and that's why they should get paid more. I'm like, I don't know if that's like, I don't know if the draw is truly justifying unequal revenue sharing.
Right.
Because, yeah, you win more, you get extra games. You are the only team in the conference bringing that success, bringing that notoriety, those viewers. But when you get into the conference and you start looking at conference games, I think it's very, very tough to convince the other conference members to accept that.
Well, see, I think right now it's pretty much inevitable, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years down the road, Florida State and Clemson are gone. I think they're going to end up in the ACC, the SEC or the Big Ten, which is going to lead to a conversation that really stirred your pot yesterday.
I thought we were getting here.
I had to take it here. So Patrick Crates, the former Fox Sports executive, was on the afternoon show on 365 Sports earlier this week. And one of the things he was talking about is how it's almost inevitable we're going to go to these two super leagues. And while I guess the appointed elitist in me is like, hell yeah, let's have some great football, of some great brands going at it week in and week out. You are how would I put this?
I don't think it can happen.
It's not. You don't think it can happen?
I don't think it can happen the way everyone thinks it will happen.
Okay, and why?
I think there will be a point where the power that the football programs hold, whether it's you want to say it's because of the money or because of this or that, the power the football programs hold will clash with the power of the academic institution.
Isn't that exactly what we're seeing right now in the Pac-12, in particular with Stanford and Cal?
Yeah. So
how, is this going to be how can we look at their situation and how all this unfolds once the TV deal comes, I think we'll see it by mid-March for the Pac-12. But once those numbers come out and we start seeing if teams are cool with it and want to stay, or if they want to start looking in other directions, do you think we could look at how Cal and Stanford handle this situation as a blueprint going forward for other teams in that scenario?
I do not, and the main reasons are the amount of money, the amount of institutions affected, and frankly, the idea of super leagues. I just don't think it might not initially start like this, but I don't think you can keep from paying players and treating them as true professionals once a super league starts. Now, you want to treat them like true professionals. That, to me, and we're about to go on a series of steps that not everyone will agree with. Not everyone will say, well, that won't definitely lead to that.
Yeah.
But in my mind, a super league leads to professionalism. Professionalism leads to not forcing academics, not taking classes. All of a sudden, your players aren't taking classes. Are they a part of this institution? These academic institutions will, in my mind, have to draw a line there. And at that point, the stadiums are owned by the academic institutions. The salaries of the coaches are paid by these academic institutions. The money is there to pay for the stadiums and for the salaries from just the league. But will they accept branding deals? Will the University of Georgia Bulldogs and Kirby Smart still be the University of Georgia Bulldogs coached by Kirby Smart if the University of Georgia is not paying Kirby Smart's salary, not paying the player's salary, and they have to rent the stadium from the University of Georgia?
See, I don't think it will get to all that. I just feel like the concept of it is you would do essentially what Notre Dame's doing right now, where you're handful of football teams selected, let's say it's 32, just kind of going off of the NFL, you would have those teams play football separately from other sports, where they would be in their own little league for football, but all of the remaining sports would stay in conference. So like say Vanderbilt gets left out for football, but they still play football. They play, all right, put it to you like this. So it's like Villanova, right? Like Villanova plays D1 basketball, but they play D1 football.
FCS football.
FCS football. I think you're looking at where these schools are playing a certain level of football, and if you're not invited in that, you play all of your other sports in the same league. But if you're like, that's where it gets tricky though. So like, say
my big thing there is that what my entire argument, the premise it's built on, is the level of football that they want to go up to is not compatible with academic institutions.
But how is it any different? How is the level going to be any different than what it is now?
The money.
But they're getting the money regardless.
No, that's that. It's so natural for me to make this jump. It's going to be tough for me to explain.
Right.
And I could be completely wrong here. I hope I'm not coming off like an ass.
No,
like,
but I'm not saying like
this?
contracts. What I'm saying is like, I'm not saying go to contracts. I'm saying the money as is NIL based or loosely, however all that crap is. We know how that's going. I feel like that's not really going to change. Like, are you saying it's going to be like you're going to put the players under contracts?
I'm saying the players will. Once the Super League happens, the money will increase. When the money increases, the players will be like, our money needs to increase because we're earning you more money. When the players get to that point, they will demand contracts. When the players demand contracts, they will want to be treated like professionals. When they're treated like professionals, why are they going to class? They're professional football players.
But that also kind of goes back to...
When they're not going to class, why is this a university's football team?
But they would be going to class, wouldn't they? I mean, I don't... That's
No. Did you follow that?
Yeah, I know. I got what you're saying. I just feel like the money, like, all right, it kind of ties into what we were talking about the other day with the NIL. Like, they're going to get the money from somewhere else because the NIL they're getting right now is essentially not what they asked for, right? Like,
yes. So I went on another rant the other day. I probably sound like some crazed lunatic ranting all the time, but I went on another rant the other day, and this rant was about how the players and NIL is not what the players asked for. What the players wanted was a slice of the existing pie, a slice of the revenue they bring in to the universities through these media deals, through these contracts. What they got is universities saying, you can take other people's money.
We're going to keep ours.
We're going to keep
you're
ours.
You're not getting this. We're going to make sure you don't get none of ours.
Yeah. And I just find that absolutely insane. Like, I know the players don't care. They're getting money that they
don't care where it comes from.
They don't care where it comes from. But all of a sudden, it seems like it's now on fans. And when I say fans, I include boosters. I include business owners, local business owners, people who love the university they love and the football team they love. It's now on them to pay for the players. And when the players are like, look at this money we're helping generate, they're not getting the money they helped generate. They are asking, like, they've asked for money, and now the universities are like, well, we're not giving you our money, so go ask them. And they're like, okay, as long as we get money.
Right.
And I can't blame the players for that. This is not me blaming the players. But I think it's absolutely messed up that they wanted a slice of the pie, and the people who control that pie are like, well, you can have a slice of this other pie. It's the exact same flavor.
Greed is magical. Greed is magical, Jack.
Holy crap, man. It's crazy to me. And so I just kind of see that tied in as like eventually the players are just going to have to, they're going to out.
That's going to take a union though. Like I feel like it's going to get to the point where we see what they were pushing for a few years back. Like before you made that jump, you're going to have to put a union together.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think there has to be a union, but I think there's definitely a jump there, and I think that jump coincides with the jump in money of a Super League. Yeah. I think a Super League could get a crazy TV contract.
It would be absurd.
And at a certain point, I think the players are going to catch on to what I'm saying of like, So our money's not coming from that TV contract.
Right.
And you just, like you, the universities, or whoever you want to say it at this point, the teams, the entity that the players play for, they just got this massive pay increase. And the players will realize that is not the pie we are getting our slice from. And so then I think there will be a breaking point where they do end up getting a slice of that pie. When they get a slice of that pie, I think that's also when they become professional, when they unionize. When they can become professional, I mean, I've tried to take you down this road before. So
interesting times.
I just don't see universities and football teams as compatible once the money gets to the point where these players almost have to be professionals.
Dude, it's going to be so insane.
And I think the Super League is that point. That's why I say it's not all of that together is not compatible. There's the other stuff I talked about, ranted about yesterday of I don't think the SEC leaves behind Vanderbilt. And I think the point when they would leave behind Vanderbilt is the point when the academic institutions are like, nah, y'all can go play football and be something else. But you are not part of this institution anymore.
Wild times, man. Wild times out there in the streets. So that's it for Florida State. That's the expansion, all of that. It's good time. But on the horizon, man, while March Madness is here, along comes spring football as well. And we're going to dive into some of the things to look for in spring football for the Big 12 next here on the College Chaos podcast. Welcome back into the final segment of the College Chaos podcast. Garrett Ross, Jack Mackenzie here with you. And man, like football never ends. I've known this, but over the past few years with realignment and, you know, like the NIL and everything, it's become more glaring. Yeah, it's insane to me.
There is no off season.
There really isn't. And so we're to the point now where We are a month, like I think literally less than a month, like 1 day less than a month out from spring football. And
well, at least from Baylor's
perspective.
We know that for
we
a
know
fact.
that for a fact. Yeah.
We had a
Keytron.
I wasn't necessarily going to name drop, but we had a player in for an interview last night with Paul Catalina from The Late Show, and he was like, "Oh yeah, spring practice starts 3 weeks from today. So 3 weeks from yesterday is when Baylor spring practice starts."
So there's going to be a lot of interesting storylines looking into this, and you got the new teams coming in. What are they going to bring? So I found this article on The Athletic this morning doing some prep, and they kind of go through and they issue one question for each team. So I thought it'd be kind of neat to put our perspective on it, kind of look at what they have and go from there. But I guess we could start with Baylor. So there's a lot of questions. I mean,
a lot of
bro,
questions.
like there's so many questions we can get into, whether it's the offensive line, what that's going to look like. But I think right now your main focus is probably going to be your quarterback battle. Now that you have Sawyer Robertson come in from Mississippi State, and then probably like who is going to step up as your playmakers. Because last year, man, while Richard Reese was going off and balling out from the running back perspective, Baylor wasn't able to spread the field, and that was kind of like the whole emphasis going into the season. We're getting rid of Gary Bohannon because Blake Shapen can stretch the field, and for whatever reason, they were not able to take advantage of that. What are you looking for, or what is your thought process right now on that for Baylor?
I mean, frankly, since we already name-dropped him, it's the guy who was in this building last night, Keatron Jackson.
Yeah.
Does he open up the offense as the number one outside receiver? Because if he opens it up, Monterey Baldwin, Baylor's number one receiver from last year, who's much more of a slot guy, much more of a gadget slot guy, speed guy, that opens up the middle of the field for him. If those two do that, then I think you can start mixing in the tight ends more. They lose Ben Sims, but Drake Dabney will hopefully recover from his leg injury.
You also brought over Jake Roberts.
You brought over Jake Roberts, who's supposed to be a pretty good team leader. He came from UNT, right?
Yeah.
So you brought over Jake Roberts. You also have Kelsey Johnson. It'll be very interesting to see. You have a stable of good running backs. No one who like necessarily is crazy
I'm interested to see what Dom does. I think Dominic Richardson could be the X factor.
The Oklahoma State transfer.
Yeah.
You want to dive into that a little?
Well, I think when you look last year at Baylor, and really when Jordan Jenkins went out against it was BYU, wasn't it?
Tay McWilliams?
Tay McWilliams, my bad. Tay McWilliams went out. I was sitting there like, wait a minute, that didn't sound right. Yeah, no, when Tay went out, it was like, okay, now you got to change up your flow of your running backs, because I think they were looking at it where Tay was going to be the banger, you throw Quaylen in, and then you have Richard Reese cut loose. And I don't think they had any aspects of Richard Reese playing near as much as he did last year.
Let's be real. I think the plan was Tay's the bell cow, Squirrel's the change of pace, Reese gets a blow here or there for them. And it ended up being Reese is kind of the bell cow, Quaylen's the third down back and the banger, and Squirrel is the here and there when we trust him and when he's healthy. So there's a massive change there. But really, let's be real. It all comes down to the quarterback. And that's the biggest question Baylor will have to answer.
It really is. And I think kind of listening to some of the stuff Keytron was saying last night, he's pretty confident in the zip coming from Blake. I like that they're already, getting some reps in, and as well as Sawyer. So it's going to be interesting to see. That's going to be one thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, my next big question for the Big 12 comes from the defending champs. And frankly, a team I kind of have a soft spot for now with I feel like I'm part of the K-State family now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Emaw over here.
Yeah, a little. Baylor first, always. But but how are they going to replace the skill talent? Will Howard looks good coming back, but you lose Deuce Vaughn, you lose Malik Knowles. You also lose Cade Warner, who was the third leading receiver.
Yeah.
You return, what was his name? I want to say it was like Phillip, the second leading receiver, and you return Sano, I don't know how it's pronounced, I'm very sorry, the tight end who absolutely torched Baylor here at Waco. Yeah. So you're returning a couple guys, but you are losing your best athletes out there on offense.
Yeah, I don't see K-State being able to rebound and get to the Big 12 championship. Anytime you lose players like Knowles and Deuce Vaughn, that's especially Deuce, man. Like, he's a generational player. Like, that's a guy that you just don't replace that. And I know they brought in some guys in the transfer portal, but I think it's going to be really hard to replace the not just like the running, man, but like he did everything. The catching out of the backfield. It's going to be really interesting to see what they can do. But I like Will Howard. I think he's arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. I just don't know that. I see him probably having to take a step backwards because he's not going to have the reliability around him play in and play out.
Yeah, they brought in Keegan Johnson, a wide receiver from Iowa, and they brought in Florida State running back Trayshawn Ward.
Yeah.
But as much as I wish them success, and I think I picked them in my title game against Texas. Again, there's a reason I picked Texas in that title game.
Yeah.
I just don't know if it all clicks enough for them.
Well, Texas is one of the teams that I have my eye on. I feel like Texas should win the Big 12. And I know that's said year in and year out. We've touched on that. I just feel like this team feels
looks better
different.
than this year? Who looks better than them in the Big 12 this year?
Not even close. I don't see anybody getting near them, but that's just me. But I feel like and obviously the main conversation piece coming in is the quarterback battle. And all of the tension is around Arch Manning. And, I mean, I wouldn't say rightfully so. Like, if you go back and watch, he wasn't really playing high-caliber opponents night in and night out.
I think the question isn't who wins the quarterback battle in Austin. It's does Ewers lock it down or not?
He has to. I feel like Quinn Ewers has to lock it down. And if
he has to, but will he?
Yeah, I think he does. Because if he doesn't, okay, I was thinking about this morning. If Quinn Ewers, for whatever reason, loses this quarterback battle, that kind of puts him, to me, like that's a major blow to his confidence at first. And then, like, do you start talking about this being one of the bigger busts in college? Like, this is getting like JT Daniels, Tate Martell range if he doesn't live up to that, right?
This is not Tate Martell territory yet. This is not Tate Martell territory.
Okay, well then, with JT Daniels at least. Like, you had all this hype and nothing? Like, I feel like he's too good. I feel like Quinn's too good for that to happen. While he looked flawed at times last year on some of his passes.
I think you're right, and I do think the JT Daniels comparison is a good kind of like if it doesn't work out, then he's that guy. Honestly, I think you're right.
So who's one other team that you're looking at that you really have question marks for?
Oh man, I really have question marks. I mean, outside of the obvious teams, the teams that like aren't expected to be up there, I do have some serious question marks about the other two top teams in Texas. The defending playoff team, TCU. Do they have enough returning on either side of the ball to make another run?
Oh, I don't think so, man. Like, we've gotten into this before. I just feel like Chandler Morris should be your guy. They didn't bring anybody in to really compete with him or battle it out in fall and spring camp. I just feel like you know who your quarterback is going to be, but you lost everybody. Like, this is eerily similar to what Baylor dealt with last year, and you got a whole new offensive coordinator coming in. While the scheme should be pretty much the same, there is that aspect of it. Are certain how many people are going to get into the flow of spring ball, not like how things go, and then hit the portal? It's going to be really interesting. I just feel like TCU has lost too much to really make any real noise or even come close to what they did last year.
Yeah, I'm not going to count them out too heavily just yet. You win a championship, you get win championship. Why am I even giving that to them? Jeez. You make it to the title game and you make it to the playoff. I'm going to give you some deference, but they're bringing in a new OC who should be pretty good for them, but we'll see. My other one, because I definitely mentioned those two Texas teams, is Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Like, who is their quarterback? Because if it's supposed to be Shuck, he's solid. But is he going to stay healthy? And is Baron Morton not going to beat him out? And then, because you can hit both of these things, do they have a line to protect those quarterbacks?
That's the thing. The line is the biggest question. You've got a couple of guys you've brought in via the portal. You're going to be in a situation where you got guys playing new positions along the line, which I think it's intriguing. I think that's probably one of those things where, and this is just from listening to some of the offensive linemen from Baylor talk over the past couple of years, I feel like that's more of an outside perspective thing where you look at the line and be like, well, can this guy do this? I feel like everybody, if you're a good college level offensive lineman, you should be able to play pretty much every position along the line. Center would be the one where you're kind of iffy on. But I feel like there's just too much going on there right now. It's going to take some time for the chemistry to build. And when you're playing like Oregon in week 2, we're going to learn real quick what they're about up there in Lubbock from the offensive line perspective. And when you get into the quarterback battle, I know they wanted Shuck to be the guy. Like, that was the whole plan coming in. But when you look at way Morton played, and he was like, I remember covering him in high school, dude. He was just cold. Like, everybody wanted Brendan Morton. And I feel like he's the better talent overall. I wouldn't be surprised I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised if they named Shuck, but I wouldn't name a quarterback if I was Tech. Because I would just, because you just need to go into the season and let them battle it out there. That way you're not losing a guy to the portal, because whoever you don't name out of Morton and Shuck, one of them's going to bounce. Yeah. And you can't afford that from a depth perspective. But if it was me, I would rather have Brennan. I think he's got the bigger upside. He's more talented all the way around. Now, is that what happens? I'm not sure. But to me, you got to go into the season without having your quarterback solidified.
Fair enough. Any last teams you want to hit?
As far as the new coming teams coming in, I think Cincinnati's intriguing because you got Satterfield taking over for Luke Fickell. You got a good quarterback in place. I just don't know what to make of the change. I really wasn't sold at what Satterfield was able to do at Louisville. I think when you lose a guy like Fickell, that kind of takes off the shine of what you are as a whole from a program. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. That's just kind of how I see it. Houston, you're coming in where Dana Holgorsen has already caught a lot of slack. They wanted to give him the opportunity to come into the Big 12 and kind of lay that foundation. You're replacing your quarterback. You're replacing some of your other key players. I don't expect them to be very good. I think this will probably be a one-and-done situation for Holgorsen. BYU, you got Keaton Slovis as your quarterback. It's going to be interesting to see what he could do. But BYU, the way they the season fell last year, I really don't know what to make of them. I'm so kind of apprehensive for them coming into the league. I think they're going to handle it well. And then I was really high on UCF. Like, even when we did our segment going over to the schedules, but you're having to replace 10. I didn't realize you're having to replace 10 key contributors off that roster. And I don't know that that's ideal when you're trying to make the jump.
Especially 3 offensive linemen.
Yeah, that right there has kind of got me like apprehensive and wanting to pump the brakes a little bit on the expectations for UCF, even though I like them a lot.
Yeah, you love that bounce house.
Love the bounce house.
Anyway, thanks y'all for tuning in to our 7th episode. Hope y'all enjoyed. We will get different segments uploaded to Crystal Ball College Football YouTube channel. Please check out Grayson's videos on this channel, especially the realignment stuff. We've got the late show today on 365 Sports.
Yep.
And is there anything I'm missing?
If you're a Baylor fan, make sure to go to sickle365.com, become a subscriber. We have just hands-on the best content out there if you're a Baylor fan, day in and day out. So go in and check that out, but that's all I got.
Yeah. We will catch you guys next time.
Holla.